We're going to welcome Remy Bertot.
Hey, hello everyone. I hope everyone can hear me fine. I think we're good. Okay. All right. So let me first start by saying like a big thanks for who organized the CakeFest this year. We are very happy to be here, and I'm not sure if we can do that. If we can give them a little round of applause in the chat, if you can find the clap emoji, show them some love, that would be really nice. So I'm Remy. You may remember me from, if you're familiar with Passbolt, from support thread like why are my emails not being sent, or why can I not install Passbolt on my connected fridge. Generally, this is what I do. And so these questions on the community forums. Of course, I'm not the only member of Passbolt. So you have Kevin and Cedric, also co-founders, and you have Diego, our official meme artist, and Alka, Shmoti, Jean-Marc, who are in customer support and success, and Max, Benjamin, and Carl, who just joined us, who are working the development team. So we are from Luxembourg, a place that is famous for its forges. And no, actually, Luxembourg is like this. It has a very clear stream. It's very famous for clear stream, indeed. I'm not sure everyone will get the joke. So it's a very nice place. If you are in Europe, come visit us. We'll be very happy to talk about PHP and show you our office and talk about Passbolt if you're interested. So today, yes, I'm going to talk about Passbolt. Passbolt, if you're not familiar with it, it's an open source password manager that is designed for productivity and collaboration. So it's something that you can install on premise, and you can install it on any Linux server. It's interoperable and extensible. So it's basically a RESTful API, and it's based on OpenPGP. So you can decrypt the content also with other tools like GNU-PG. And you can choose the algorithm that you want to use to encrypt that sort of things. It's collaborative, so you can share passwords, you can receive notification when passwords are changed, you can see when people are using passwords, that sort of things. And it's open source, so even the paid version is open source. We have users all over the world, 75,000 users at the moment on a daily basis on average, and 8,000 organizations around the world, around 400 clients. So I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh, he's going to sell us something. No, it's not a trap. Today, I'm not going to try to sell you Passbolt. Today, I'm going to try to explain a little bit how does Passbolt work, what is going on behind the scene. So we're going to have a look at the overview on how we misuse PHP mostly, and some of our lesson learned. So today, no sales speech, and I'm not going to talk about deadlines because we generally don't respect these, and you're not going to get Diego's phone number either. Passbolt architecture is very simple. It's a LAMP stack, so you have Linux running on Docker or any Linux flavor that you like, then Nginx or Apache, some caching, a database, MariaDB, or MySQL. Then you have the PHP application, Passbolt API, and PHP GNU-PG module is enabled so that we can do a little bit of crypto with GNU-PG. On top of that, you have a JavaScript application that is served by the server, which is called the app.js, and it does take care of like non-critical operations, such as, for example, setting up like the admin settings, that sort of things, or like installation wizard. And on top of that, we have the real client, which is like in a web extension that is developed in React. And the crypto is done in OpenPGP.js, which is an implementation of the OpenPGP standard in JavaScript. And obviously, we have more clients developed by the community or by us. So what platform is supported? At the moment, we have Chrome and Firefox on the client side, and we have Ubuntu, CentOS, Debian, Docker, and virtual machines, appliances. We support Edge, Brave, and Opera, and a little bit of a command line interface, because it's not complete yet, the command line interface. And yeah, we are working on some other clients. I know it's been a while, but we're still working on them. So Passbolt is a security software. Let's talk a little bit about security. So no system is perfect. Security is about managing risk, and that's what we do on a daily basis. Passbolt is based on public key cryptography. I mentioned OpenPGP standard. So if you're not familiar with it, it's like you have a public key that is used to encrypt content. Is your public key or the public key of a recipient, and you have the private key that is used to decrypt this content and sign. So Passbolt is a bit different than other password manager because we don't use one single vault that is encrypted asymmetrically. We encrypt each secret for each person that should be having access to it. So that gives us like a more granular access management and some cryptographic properties such as re-encryption secrecy. So that, for example, when you kick out somebody from a group, when the archive is encrypted symmetrically, generally you don't kick them out from the crypto point of view. So we don't have analytics software inside the application. We don't do tracking. There is no third-party scripts. It's all bundled into the application. We have bug bounty program and we do regular audits as well. There is no crypto over HTTPS. Everything is in the client. So here is a little bit more detailed than the previous illustration. That is really like a oversimplification. This is how it works, like in a bit more detail. You encrypt the data, you sign them, you send them to the server, and then the other user get the secret, decrypt it using the private key, and verify using the other person's public key, and you get the plain text again. So why does Passbolt require an extension? So the main reason behind that is that we do not want to compromise the code of the cryptography part if the server is compromised. So this way we can create an application, bundle it, sign it, ask for Mozilla add-on to serve it for us, and we can make sure that each user is running the good version of the application. So if a server is compromised, it's not possible to compromise the crypto part. So you have other advantages, like for example, you have access to automatic updates. So not everyone is updating their Passbolt server when they should. So this way, with the add-on being controlled by us, we can push update directly and make sure that the biggest security issues are solved on the spot. And there are some reviews by a third party. So basically people from Mozilla are reviewing what we are doing. And so you get an additional assurance that we are not doing some shenanigans. So the authentication, how does it work in Passbolt is a bit different also than other password manager. We don't use, we don't send a password. What we do is something that is similar to SSH, where basically it will be a challenge to solve by the client. This challenge is basically something that is encrypted, a random number that is encrypted for the client, that the client needs to prove he is able to decrypt. So it gives some interesting security properties. Like for example, you have phishing protection. So if you get access to the passphrase, you cannot log in. You will need the private key and the passphrase to be able to log in. It prevents from a brute force attack on the login as well, because every single challenge is unique and random. So you cannot try as many times as possible or try like popular passphrase. Or there is also a passphrase protection. Yeah, so because we are not sending a version, an extended version of the passphrase server side, that sort of things. And there is additional properties from the first optional step, which is the verification of the server. So it protects you from domain takeover. So let's say um, somebody seizing your domain name is trying to pretend that it's you. So the security risks that are covered by Passbolt is we provide real end-to-end encryption. As we said, we prevent phishing attacks, and we prevent like regular threat for modern web application like XSS and SQL injection. Thanks to CakePHP middleware, for example, we also prevent from cross-site request forgery, which is basically somebody on another site trying to perform an action on Passbolt by creating a form on a third-party domain. They would send their user to Passbolt to create a password or delete a password. That sort of things are not possible thanks to the cross-site request forgery token. What is excluded? What are the risks that Passbolt does not really deal with at the moment? So the metadata are not encrypted. So for example, the name or the URL of a resource is not part of the encrypted part. Currently, we are working on an improvement that will allow you to select which part of the secret will be encrypted, which part of the resource will be part of the secret, if you will. And similarly, we don't prevent attack scenarios where the client will be compromised. So like if you have a keylogger on your computer, obviously Passbolt is not going to be real use. And we also don't expose all the signature ceremonies that are there in the OpenPGP protocol and standard, because we want to hide that kind of complexity from the end user. So in the future, we might go there and you might start seeing like little verified fields like you have in Twitter, but like, at the moment it's not there. So what's happening on the client side? So there is quite a bit to unpack there. Like currently we are in the middle of a migration where React is going to replace a framework that is called JavaScript MVC that we used to use. And we are in the middle of it. So if you arrive in the middle of the project, right now it looks a little bit like that. But hopefully by the end of the month, you will have the new version and everything will be in React a bit more clear. So everything from the front end, from the website, from the help site, from the job site, everything is what we call the style guide, which is basically where we store all the front end code, HTML, CSS, and now JavaScript as well. So you can have a mock of the entire application and entire website. And so this way we can have people working on the design without knowing how to work on an extension or work on some fine-tune some small interactions that would require to put the application in a state that would be complicated to do manually. What is our design process? So we use something similar to what I'm presenting here on the screen, which is like a user experience treasure map, which we try to follow some process like that, but we actually use a little bit less deliverables. If you don't know this experience treasure map, I invite you to have a look. They explain what are the different deliverables that are part of the design process. Is really interesting. So the first step, and I link an example, I'll share the presentation at the end, and we have an example of how we've done that for some other features. So we define the problems and goals. The most important thing is what is the problem that we're trying to solve, because like if you arrive with a solution, everything is a problem. You know? We start with the problem. We define the approaches, the pros and cons of different approaches, because when you deal with security, you also have to balance a lot of usability and security. We mock a solution, so we use the style guide to create like a prototype, or we use intermediary like a pen and paper or Sketch or some other wireframing tools, and we create the user story. So we use a way to describe, maybe you are familiar with it, it's called BDD, and you describe all the scenario as with sentences such as given that I'm a logged in user on the password workspace, then when I click on this thing, then that happened. When I click on that, then this happened. And we create scenarios like this, which translate well into frameworks like, for example, Behat. We don't use Behat per se because like it's not, when you know to code, it's an additional step that is not necessary. But it's useful when you have like non-technical people in the team that can help you create test scenarios. And then you basically transfer this BDD scenario into code. And after that, we validate this solution with the community. So we sent, messages on mailing list or the forum, and we ask people for feedback. And sometimes we do a direct observation test. So we get Cedric Mom to sit in a room and click on the prototype and see if she managed to complete the task. The web extension architecture. So as I say, it's really like heavy work going on right now, but like I'm not sure if you're familiar with the extension model, but I'm going to try to explain a bit quickly. An extension is something that is run by the browser, and you have what is called a background page or a background script. It's something that is launched when the browser is launching your extension. So it's like a service worker that is working all the time, and that basically contains the main application for us. So this application decides, for example, when to insert JavaScript on the page. And so let's say you're on the login page, it will insert the login application. When you're on the, when you're logged in and you're on the user workspace, it will insert the user workspace, that sort of things. So the advantage of this model is that the content script and the regular JavaScript that is running on the page that is served by the server is not running in the same sandbox. So they can communicate, but they cannot, they do not share the same JavaScript runtime environment. So for example, you cannot access a variable value from the web page to another variable in the content script. So it creates some isolation that is useful to provide security in that. And the content script can communicate with the background page through some ports and workers, the same way you have with a service worker. And from there, then you have all the logic and the cryptography that is happening behind the scene, and some services that are used to share passwords and encrypt them and send them to the API, the JSON API. We also have other clients, as I mentioned. We have the CLI, which right now is read-only, but there are also some other community CLI that are available, developed by Leap or people from XWiki as well. And we are working on mobile as well. So it's going to happen soon, probably beginning of next year. CakePHP, finally. We have done with the client. Let's talk a little bit about CakePHP. Why did we choose CakePHP? So the main reason why we choose CakePHP is that we had experience with it in the past. With Kevin and Cedric, we work on, for example, a site called Click on French, which is like an e-learning platform to learn French. And we have also worked on payment gateway integrations and that sort of things. And it was very reliable for us, and we had experience working with it from CakePHP version 1, and then now we are version 3 and 4. It's easy to learn. We were happy that there was a security audit done in 2017, and hopefully we can facilitate another one soon. And there's a few, there are very few security gotchas. So it's by default, unless you're doing something like really crazy, if you keep things simple, CakePHP is gonna protect you from doing anything wrong. There are a few things that you should know about, and you can find them in the documentation, but there are not so many, so it's actually quite nice. And the community is also super friendly, and this is something that we really like about CakePHP community. The cons is there is no actual cake. Like I don't know why you all keep saying that you're baking and there is no cake. This is a mystery to me. The major updates, they are sometimes annoying, but I say respectfully, they are more all the time worth it. So for example, from version 2 to version 3, the ORM layer completely changed, but it was a big improvement. Yeah, the con is also a pro. It's not so hype, so like it is. The community is a little bit smaller, but actually, personally, I like it. There are some testing gotchas that we had. Is I can maybe talk later on testing. I will talk a little bit on that, but like yeah, we had some pain points on testing. So what is a CakePHP application? You're familiar with it. There is all the bootstrapping and middleware and then routing, and then controller use tables and entities, and behaviors are plugged on table, and you have then this data is sent to the view for rendering, and then the middleware goes through the response object and send it back. So we didn't do any modification to that life cycle. We did add some elements to it driven by our needs. So as you can see, the main difference is in the config. So we have additional requirements. So when at the beginning of the application, we check, for example, is the PHP GNU-PG extension installed? And we have also like more complex configuration system. Not everything is in one file. We have different layers of files. For example, we have one file that controls the environment variables, and then we have one file that can be added to override that. And so this creates different layers of configurations depending on what kind of backend you're using. And then we have additional configuration file for example, for file storage, to if you need to create a different adapter and you don't want to use the file system, but you want to use, I don't know, Amazon or GCP buckets. We also added an additional layer, which is called what we call service, but which some of you may call action, which basically help us in the scenarios where you have very fat controllers, because you're doing things with multiple tables and you do not want to move that logic into a table, because it relates to multiple tables that don't necessarily have anything to do with each other. So we generally move this kind of complex actions into services. We have some events as well. So for example, from the controllers, you can register filters or parameters, additional parameters. For example, I want to filter by users. I want to contain certain associations. When you create plugins, they might add their own filters. They might add their own contain statements to the basic API endpoints. So this way, basically the way it works is the controller sends some events to the plugins to see if anyone wants to register some additional filter or that sort of parameters. And similarly on the table, we have the same. So if there are plugins that want to decorate the tables or decorate some queries, then some events are launched. They are also launched when like some key actions are completed. For example, when we complete like the user registration, you want to send an email. So then basically we broadcast this kind of event so that other plugins can do what they have to do based on the completion of a certain action. In terms of view, Passbolt is quite slim. We don't have much going on, except for maybe like the web installer or that sort of things. But the view, we use a custom view, for example, to format the JSON result to support like multiple API versions, that sort of things. But there's nothing particularly interesting going on that front. So the design principle that we try to follow is focusing on what brings value to the end user. So it's like every decision that we make, we decide, is it a priority? Does it create value for the end user? We try to keep things as simple as possible. And even though we're very tempted, we tend not to add things that are not directly useful right now. We do that by experience, because when we started developing, we started like putting all sorts of features in it. But it's better to actually do something small and do it very well, rather than try to do multiple things at once. And we also follow one principle, which is factorize later. So it's like kind of the dry principle, but dry later. So dry means do not repeat yourself. We do repeat ourselves up to 4 times, and then when there is 4 occurrences of a problem, then we can define a generic solution to take care of this. But we try not to be too proactive in factorizing things. So you may see in our code like a more boilerplate code than maybe you're used to. But we feel it's too tempting generally to go and factorize when you don't have a complete definition of the problem and how it will, where it will go. You tend to maybe find the wrong architecture for that problem, because you don't know what's the full problem yet. We tend to prefer service test to unit test, and I'll come back to this. But basically, testing like controller calls are more important than testing, for example, a particular validation rule, because it creates more value, even though it's a little bit slower. Things that we don't do, so, or that we invite you not to do, is like, don't compare yourself to Google. Don't compare yourself to like bigger ones that are doing fancy design and fancy things. Don't use too many libraries and plugins unless you're actually willing to dig into the how does this library work, how does this plugin implement and solve my problem. It's a bad idea to just jump and use it. Don't let the testing needs drive your design. So it's sometimes you create abstraction for the sake of facilitating testing, and you may have a testing problem rather than you might be working on your testing and not solving the end user problem. So yeah, yeah, it's pretty much like don't overthink things. The core of Passbolt is pretty simple. You have users, you have profile and GPG keys, and each user can have a role, admin or user. And then you have group users, so people can belong to many groups. And we have permissions. So permission can be associated with user and groups. So you can say this particular item can be readable by this group or this user. And the item in question is what we call resources. They are the passwords, but not only. In the future, using resource types, we will be able to create like SSH key, not just passwords, but other type of content. The secret part of the content is called secret. So the resource is the metadata, and the secret is the encrypted part. And we store for each user that have access, we store the secret version for this user. We also have tags. So tags is like a label. You can assign multiple labels to a resource. And we have folders. So folders are a bit more complicated because folder can be nested. And you have also permission associated with folders. So you can say like, I give everyone who have access to this folder, I give read or ownership or update write. And you can put resources into folders. And basically when you move, for example, we will apply the permission of the folder to the resources, that sort of things. Email notification is typically an example of where we over-engineer things a little bit. but it's to give you an example of how you can use events in CakePHP if you're not familiar with it. So in our use case, for example, we use events for plugins to register emails. So at the beginning, at the bootstrap, all the redactors, so all the plugins that have emails that they want to send, they will subscribe to an event that is give me all the emails, and then this redactor will subscribe to a given event. So for example, as the user registration success email redactor, I want to be notified when the user registration success event happens. And then basically, when that event happens, the event is triggered and dispatched to the email subscription dispatcher that use the email subscription manager to request the success email redactor to create the email and add the email to the queue. So in that case, there's a little bit of over engineering. We separate the event handling and the event action. Yeah. So there are a few key plugins that we use that might be of some interest for you. For example, multi-factor authentication, Active Directory, the web installer. So it replaces the state. For example, when you launch CakePHP and nothing is installed, you can see a page that tells you like, okay, I can connect to the database or not, that sort of things. So we replace that section with a web installer. So that might be interesting for you. For example, if you're distributing your PHP application for people to install themselves, you might want to have a look at that plugin and see how we do that. We have audit logs as well. So we plug on model events, for example, save a resource after save event, and we perform some additional tasks like storing some information about what happened. We also have email digest, which is based on email queue. So it's another layer on top of email queue that allows you to create digest. And we have reports coming up. And so pretty much every concept of CakePHP we use in Passbolt. And I'm happy to, if you're interested to learn about how we use a particular concept, I'm happy to talk about that to you on some other occasions. But we use pretty modeless form, for example, to save settings or communicate with a third-party service, that sort of things. We use shells, for example, we have a health check task that runs and see is the integrity of the database okay, that sort of things. We use middleware for MFA, we use middleware for security as well, and custom view, as I said, for legacy versioning of output format. The third-party plugin we use, so we follow our design principle, which is like not use too many plugins. So the ones that we use is the CakePHP migration, which is like super useful, and the Lorenzo email queue, and Borzum CakePHP image plugin, imaging plugin, and file storage, which allows you to change the backend for storing your files. And then we use third-party libraries. So OpenPGP PHP, which is a PHP implementation of PGP to validate some of the OpenPGP messages and all sorts of other items for MFA, like a Duo security to have an MFA provider for Duo. We did a code review in 2017, I think, and I think we're going to do one after we migrated to CakePHP 4. It's super useful. CakeDC is really helpful. If you need to review your application, they will give you some benchmarks on how you're faring with security, code quality, separation of concern, and performance issues. So we had some do's and don'ts, things that we do in Passbolt that are not so great. I'm not sure how I'm doing with time because like we started late. So mm, okay, I'm not gonna dig into these details, but the result of the review is available on on, um, on a blog post, so you can see it. Yeah, we have the full report available publicly. And most of the things we are doing are not like critical, but they are more like things that we could improve. Mostly like fat controllers, we still used to do that before, and now we're moving these things into services. There's still a lot of boilerplate code to keep DC taste. And we are, yeah, there's some interesting findings that might apply to you or not. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the future, what we're going to do in the future with. So we're going to be migrating to CakePHP 4 and migrating authentication to middleware as well, and migrating more of this fat controller into services, provide better logging. So maybe we're going to adopt Monologue and finger cross to provide better trace when something went wrong, to have like to create checkpoints. If you don't know Monologue, I invite you to have a look. It's an interesting library. Then test and fixtures cleanup. It's like a little bit over engineer also. Like we have a huge fixture set that covers all sorts of scenarios, and now we're trying to like break down these scenarios and put them in the appropriate test. We did that initially because the fixtures, we use them to create a demo environment, so you can basically have access to already a full set of data when you want to test the application. You don't have to create resources, you don't have to create users by default. We can load one Passbolt already in a state where you have all the data. So we use the PHP fixtures to do that, but that creates some side effects on how the tests are organized, and I think we need to break that down. We need to work on cron job centralization. So right now we have one cron job to send emails, and we're gonna need more. So we're probably gonna group that task that take care of cron job into one and dispatch them. And internationalization also is something that we need to work on to translate the application in other things than English. Packaging and distribution. So Passbolt is available on Debian, Docker, installation script, virtual machine, DigitalOcean, Passbolt Cloud, distro images. So this is all the work of Diego. And we are going to add more. So in the Passbolt repository, you can find some information about that packaging, because we also keep some of these scripts and rules. So if, for example, you're interested to package your CakePHP application into a Debian package, you can look at how we did that. For example, there's a /Debian directory in the Passbolt API, and you can see how we've done it. Hopefully, Diego will find the time in the future to work on a blog post on how that entails. Because, for example, there's the Debian way of doing things and placing configuration files and placing log files, and so you need to override the default behavior that is there with CakePHP out of the box. Testing, so we do a unit and service test, and integration test. Also on top of it is Selenium testing. And I'm going to answer the question at the end. Sorry. The manual test is we describe them using a VDD format. When, given, then when. And we have end user test as well. So the integration test, sorry. We have 4 test suite. So we have integration tests, so around 300 tests running in Selenium, the API in PHP unit. So we have a few thousand tests. It's 1.5, but it's actually more than that. We have JavaScript test also, and human test, so VDD scenario, and bug bounty also. We have security researchers trying to break the application and find things. We went through 3 CI/CD stacks. So we went from Jenkins and running our own Selenium to Travis and outsourcing Selenium to SourceLab and back to GitLab and running our own Selenium again. The reason for that is that integration tests are quite finicky, and SourceLab can be quite expensive, and it also runs slower than running your own. So we went there and came back. The relevance, as I was discussing, is like the more you go towards the end user and real use case, the testing is going to be relevant. The more you test like one individual function, it's not going to, whether it breaks or not, you're not going to have indication if it's critical for your organization or your project. So in terms of value, the integration tests and above are like really interesting to know if something of value is broken. But they are slow to run. So, and they are not like easy to run. So you have to create a balance. It's the same with cheap to run. Our experience is that integration tests are like quite expensive to run because, for example, if you outsource this to SourceLab and you do like our test suite, for example, it can run in 2 hours because like 300 tests are like very long. But we created an environment where we spin 10 Passbolt and 10 browser, and we can run 10, distribute these tests into 10 instances. So we divide the time by 10, but obviously like spinning that many servers and browser, it costs time to create this infrastructure and maintain it. This infrastructure is very brittle. So as soon as you have a new Chrome version, it breaks very easily. Same with Firefox. So you're always juggling with which driver version do I have, which Selenium version do I have, which browser do I have, and it's not really nice to work with. So in the future, we're gonna try to move more of this integration test into service test and create a beta channel for end user testing, and like do less unit test unless there is complex logic that is requested. There is some interesting services like Cypress.io that you might be able to use for your project. I don't know what they are, but they look quite promising. For us, we can't use them because we use a web extension, so we have to run the full Selenium thing. But for your project, you might not reach the same kind of bottleneck, and integration test might be very easy for you, and then it might make a lot of sense for you to invest in that. So documentation, finally, we have our documentation is open using Swagger format, and on the help site as well, we have a Jekyll. So it's all open source, and you can contribute to the help if you want. So you can get involved on anything, design, testing, development. We don't bite, so you can just come and talk to us, and we'll be happy to discuss. Even show you for your project things that you could reuse. We'll be happy to talk about that. So thank you very much. I wanted to say thank you a lot to the core contributors and the community, everyone who's reporting bug on CakePHP, because it's without you, Passbolt could not exist. So a big thank you to you. And if you have any questions, if I have the time, if I don't have the time, sorry. So thank you very much. Do I have the time, Amanda? Or?
Yeah, I think you just have a couple. So if you want to answer the Q&A and the Slack, the questions, that would be great.
Okay. So what specific plugins do you use for email digest and reports? Our own. So it's new plugins that we are developing. So email digest is available on GitHub. So you can have a look how it's done. It's built on top of CakePHP by Lorenzo. So I don't think it will be plug and play for you, but you can have a look on how we did it. So maybe I can share that. I'm not sure if you can see it. Okay. All right, I'm not gonna try. Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Are you planning to distribute Passbolt using Snap or similar? So we are open to distributing Passbolt on with other distribution mechanism. We had a look at it. Most things that people asked was the Debian package, so that's what we did first. But Diego, if you want to comment on the CakeFest chat, then maybe you can express your views. It's mostly Diego who's working on packaging and distribution. Our experience, for example, with tools like Omnibus is that you need to ship everything. So you need to ship PHP, you need to ship like MySQL and everything. It's kind of used for a big project like Discourse or GitLab, which is kind of nice because then you control completely what is installed on the server. But for us, it creates an overhead in terms of like maintaining these packages. I rather offload the maintenance of say MySQL security fixes to rely on Debian packages rather than us having to ship as binary every version of MySQL that have a hole in it. So that I'm not sure if Snap is working in a similar fashion, but that's basically where we cut the cake. So I thought you are using CAN.js. Yes, we used to. Yes, we used to use CAN.js, which was called previously JavaScript MVC, and we are now moving to React. So they changed name as well. So I think that's all. I'm happy to answer the questions on the chat on CakeFest if you have some more. Thank you very much, everyone, and see you around.